Okay, in class the other day, we did kind of a speed round introduction slash refresher on the basics of a processing sketch. So we created some variables and we told processing what type of variables they're going to be. So we said this is going to be a floating point number. So in the top of the structure, I've added a comment, which we didn't really talk about. So these two forward slashes here, followed with some text on this line, tells processing computers aren't allowed to read this, right? So a comment is, computer, don't worry about this. This comment is for humans to read. Same thing here. So we're going to declare some global variables, which means that any part of the program can see these things. Then we go down to the void setup, and again, these two functions here are part of basically every processing sketch if you're going to do anything. So we want to set up the size of our canvas, and then we have other instructions that we could do in here. But this is all the stuff that happens only once and right at the beginning. And then little space here, and then we go down to the void draw, where this is where processing loops through the set of instructions over and over again. So every single frame, and hopefully for processing, if everything's going well, is 60 frames a second. So we're saying go ahead and create a new background, draw an ellipse at wherever x and y are with a width and a height of 100. And then let's take x, whatever it's been set up to be. And here what we did is we said x is equal to a random number between 0 and whatever the width is. And the same thing for y. Random, 0. So if we want to, we could type this out like that. Okay. So random accepts 2 arguments or 1 argument. So if we don't include that first little bit, random just assumes that we meant from 0 to whatever. We can also do minus numbers. We could say minus whatever the width is. So instead of 0 to width, we can have an offset between positive and negative. Okay, and we're doing that down here. So anyways, we declare what this random area is going to be, or random position, and then every time we go through, whatever that random number is, we add to it to what a new total, so plus equals means let's add a little bit, and that will be the new total. So if x is 125, and we create a new number that's, let's say randomly to make it easy, we'll say 1 or 0.5, it would be 125.5, right? Or something like that. All right, so that's how this little function. So it can go side to side, or it can go up and down based on that position, because I'm using a negative number. Right, and there is the sketch that we created in class. All right, so there are the basics of the setup. We also looked at, if we wanted to, we could give it a color. So let's just say the fill. So that's the center white part here. In fact, let's do this. We can also use some code completion here. So as I typed fill, you can see here are all the different commands that can come out of fill. So we could have just one number, 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers, or 3 numbers, or 2 numbers, or 1, whatever this is. So this would be our way of telling processing. If we just use one number, we're, say, doing a grayscale image. If we use 2 numbers, and this is just stuff you have to find in the documentation, which I'm not going to do. If I right-click on this, find reference, for whatever reason, it's kind of not active right now, but I have this open over here anyway. So if we want to, we could say fill, I don't know, 220, and let's make it 100%, so it's a little transparent. So if we had multiples of these, we could see through it, right? We could also, if we wanted to make it red, let's do 0, 0. Oops. Okay, so we can give this a red color because we're using RGB. So the red, the green, the blue, and then the fourth parameter is the transparency value of it, right? And we could change the stroke if we wanted to. We could change the stroke width. We won't deal with that right now. So let's just keep it there. And so this is the basic structure. For those of you especially that already know this, the next part is remembering that we can use, I'm going to do file, save, well, let's just save it like this. What we're going to do is add a new tab here, and what we're going to do is create an object. Because right now we have one ellipse, right? Well, what if I wanted 1,000 of those? Okay, I don't want to take this, and hopefully this would be clear that you wouldn't want to do this. And of course, and then every single one of these would have the same x and y, so then I'd need x1, y1, x2, y2, blah, blah, blah. You can see that will get out of control very quickly. So what we want to do is create an object. So this would be like a set of instructions for creating a cookie. So instead of declaring all the time exactly what that cookie should be, we can have a set of instructions that gives it the recipe. So these are the ingredients. It's going to have so many chocolate chips. In fact, we could write it in such a way it could be any cookie, and we can write variables. So it said, well, when you create a cookie, make this one bigger, make this one smaller, make this one a peanut butter cookie, make that one a chocolate chip cookie. I'm getting done with the cookie example here, but I hope that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is show you how to transfer that over and do this within a class, right? So up here on the tab, we can go ahead and click on this and say create a new tab. And instead of cookie, this is it's an ellipse. So I'm just going to call this bubble. Right? You can name this whatever you want. It doesn't matter. So it gives me another blank sheet of paper to type code into, right? So the basic structure of this is we tell processing that we want to create a class, and we're going to give it a name, right? So in this case, I named it bubble, and for this, we want it to have a capital name at the beginning, a capital letter. So bubble itself with a capital says, I am kind of the master bubble, and then later on when we use multiple bubbles, we'll use a lowercase name, right? So we say class, and we say bubble, and then we put these brackets. So all the instructions that are going to define what a bubble is going to be right in here. And then the next thing is we'll say bubble, and we'll use two little parentheses, and then again, I will put little brackets. In fact, I'm probably getting more spaces than I need here. And then the last thing is I'm going to say void run. Right, I just do auto there. Let's just look at it this way. So I say here's a class and bubble, and every time we do an open bracket, we need to close it. So that's going to be this one down here. And inside of this set of instructions are little mini instructions. So bubble here, this is the constructor, and I'm going to maybe put a little comment here. So this one, this is like the setup. This is like draw, kind of. Right. All right, so I've added some comments to kind of help here. So when we flip back and forth, I have, these are the variables that I'm going to declare to create, this is my practice bubble that I created here. What I want to do is create multiples of those. So this is like the global variables. So if I come back over here and just copy those, in fact, let's just cut those. We'll put them right in this spot. And I'm using Command T on the Mac here. I guess that's maybe Control on the PC to auto format that. Where is the, yes, there it is, edit auto format. Okay. You can also use the comment on comment line, which is command and the /. All right, so we put those variables there. So let's continue this little setup. So, or the comparison. So here is setup. And in the setup, we declared what X and Y were going to be just once, right at the beginning, not over and over again. So we'll cut that. and we'll go ahead and put that in this constructor. And again, I'm going to do auto format. So this says, I'm going to create this thing called bubble. You don't know anything about it yet. And I'm going to give it these variables. And bubble, all the things that are in bubble can see this X and Y. When you create a bubble, so this is the constructor, it is called the constructor. Sounds, I am the constructor. So bubble is going to have X and Y defined in here. And then we'll go back to this one. So we said this little function here, and so this has to be called class, and we can give it any name we want, but it has to have a capital here. And then we take that same capital because we're constructing what the kind of master bubble is, what its variables are, anything that we do here. And then down here we have void run. So this could be anything. This could be called void anything. Or some people like to say display. I like void run. I also like void display. But by using void, we're saying this is a command. It doesn't have to return a value, but it just has to do these. And when we get back over here, inside of the draw, we're going to have to tell it, hey, just keep doing this set of instructions for whatever that is. So since this is like the draw, kind of, we want to take just those dudes there, and we'll do X. Right, so these are all the commands for the bubble. So let's see if we, I'm going to stop that. If I press play and I don't get any errors, then it means this code is working. Hopefully that's obvious. All right, so you can see my code is running. I get a canvas, but nothing is happening. Okay. So I have this set of instructions for a bubble, but I haven't told the processing in the draw, in the main program here, to do anything with it. Okay? So let's go back up here. So hopefully, let's recap. So class, we always have to tell it we're writing one of these objects, and we're going to give it a name. Give it a name here. In the constructor, we'll define any of our variables. And there are other things we can do here. I guess the main comparison is this is like the variables here. Constructor is totally like setup. And then down here, and we could have multiple functions. We could have one called run, and one called display, and one called add, move, to calculate what's going on. You could have tons and tons of different little functions in here. But to make it easy on ourselves, we'll just do the one. And this has all the instructions for what we need this little guy to do as far as its motion and its display. So let's go back in here. How do we get a bubble to get into the scene? So before and this might be a little complicated, we said things like float or integer, right? So this could be float x, and integer could be a. Oops. So float is a way of telling processing, I'm going to give you a piece of data, and just so you know, it's a float number. So just keep that in mind, whatever the size should be. Same thing with integer. Okay, and a lot of programs are this way. If you're familiar with JavaScript, you do not have to do this. You just whatever variable you would do. Well, bubble is a more complicated piece of data. Okay, it's not just a number with a decimal point or a number without a decimal point. It's a bubble, and it's got a lot of stuff with it. So we need to tell processing, I'm dealing with a new data type. It's called bubble. It's one that I created, so that's why it doesn't show up with any special coloring on the letter. And I have to tell what kind of variable name we should use for this bubble, right? So I'll just say B. So float, integer, and bubble are all data types, and X, A, and B. Or, again, I can name this whatever I want. I could say my bubble, my B. Let's do my B. So bubble equals my B. Okay. And if I hit stop and press play, I don't get any errors down here, but I get a screen, but nothing is happening because all I've done is told processing, hey, I'm going to use one of these things. And it's held the space aside, but we haven't really created anything, right? So now we're going to initialize that, and we're going to say my b equals, in fact, let's think of it this way. So if I said float x, and I came down here, I would say x equals 125, okay? 0.7. Could come over here and say y equals 10. Here, I'm going to say my b equals a new thing, a new one of these, a new bubble. Okay. So we say give it the data type and what its variable name is. Then we have to say, hey, this variable is actually going to be a new bubble. So put all the stuff in the bubble, right? So run through here, say, oh, x and y are going to equal some random number. Good, cool. I've created a bubble for you. Oops, x and, oops, sorry, integer a, what that was called, my bad. All right, so my program's still running, there's no errors going on, and I have an object here, but it's still not doing anything with it. And that's because we need it to do this run. Okay, this is the set of instructions, so we need to tell processing my b.run. So this is, think of it this way, before we looked at ellipse. Okay, so this is a set of instructions in processing. Think of it would be like this. P5 is a class. This isn't quite right, but I'm making this up a little bit to show you an example. So the program in processing has a function called ellipse, and then it would have whatever the instructions are, 100 by 250 with the size and width of that. Okay. So what we're going to do here, let's get rid of that, is say I have this special object called my b, and my b, you've created this for me, now I need you to do is run this function in here, right? Right, and there is our little guy up there. Okay. I could do, let's do it again. Bubble my b2. Okay, so let's create another one. My b2 equals a new, or a new bubble. Oops. There we go. My b2 equals that, and then so I have to say, hey, my 2 run okay. We're at the critical cool point here when we start talking about object-oriented programming. A little clean up here. Okay, so we have 2 bubbles on the screen because we created 2 of them. And you'll notice that they both ended up in different places, right? And they're doing their own thing. I mean, they seem similar to each other because they have their own little wiggle-waggle. But they're different and they're unique with this set of instructions. So this is where it starts to get very cool. In fact, let's just do this one more time to get silly. So this will be my B3. I'll copy this. And this will be my B3. And we'll copy this. Now we have 3 of them, right? So clearly we don't want to get to the point where we're doing this if we want to create thousands, where we become copy and pasting masters. So what we need to do is come up with a different structure for doing that. That's going to be the next part of this tutorial. So let me do a little I'll save as, and make sure I'm putting this in my tutorial folder. There we go. Okay, so when I save that, if I go to my desktop, sorry, I'm rendering in the background here. You can see what processing has done is created the intro basics tab right here, and then I have bubble, which is its own set of instructions So it ends up being its own file. Okay, they both get a little .pde extension to it, and that's where they reside. Okay, so I'm going to stop there with that. We're going to call this Intro Basic number 2. I haven't done a number 1 because we did it in class, so I'm going to refer you back to some of the other intro tutorials I've done before in the past. And in the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how to get past copying and pasting this and actually using something called a for loop, where we could tell processing to make a whole bunch of these. And we'll also start examining how to build some variability into the bubble structure here, so we get a little more randomness with all this size. Okay, see you in a bit.